it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I'm so excited to talk to Monica Dreger today. Monica is a storyteller with extensive research in transformational markets. She's currently oversees the worldwide research initiatives for Airbnb, where she created a foundation for company growth and inspired new insights-driven philosophy. She has, in the past, she has worked at Mattel, where she oversaw the Barbie transformation. Now, you could just touch my heart as a Barbie girl from being a kid, so I had to mention that, as well as Unilever with Dove and Axe and Nickelodeon. Monica, you've had like an amazing career, and it is such a pleasure to have you on Her Success Story today.
Oh, thank you, Ivy. I'm glad to be here.
So share a little bit about how this journey got started for you. You know, you've hit some of the major brands across this country. You lived in various places. But share, like, how did the career get started for you?
Yeah, so it was a very well mapped out plan. No, that's not at all. We'll start from there.
I would like to see that.
No, as most things in life, it did not go as planned, but ended up working out. So I started in psychology and biopsychology.
Interesting.
At the time, it was called biopsychology. Now it's more of neuroscience. I was always a curious child. And always intrigued, as most people that go into psychology, they want to figure out stuff in their lives, or, you know, they're kind of stuck in their brains. So it starts from I find it from a very selfish point of what is happening to me.
How did this happen? Where do I fit in here? How do I figure this out? Oh, I know. I'll take some psychology classes.
Right. And then you go
I understand that concept.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You see, and everything you learn, you're like, oh, and that, oh my gosh, and this.
Exactly.
So like why has always been, and we kind of make fun of my company, my company and in my home, like why, to me, the word why is kind of the pillar of who I am. I'm always asking why. So I feel like that part was very natural to go into psychology and stuff. And I took a more conventional path in the beginning with cognitive psychology, worked in the beginning as a therapist.
Interesting.
And then I got quickly burnt out. I was working at a shelter for men that abuse women, and had to do with hospitals, jails at a very young age. So I took a break. I did kind of the self-care before it was
in the know.
Yeah, exactly. And went back home. My mom works in advertising, and she was like, you know what, just take a little break. Advertising uses psychologists. And the funny thing, in the beginning, I thought she meant that I would be a therapist to the advertising executives. I was like, that sounds horrible.
Horrible.
But then
men on horrible steroids.
Right, exactly. I was just like, this is not fun. But I understand, you know, it was explained how planners talk about the human insights, which are really kind of the pillars of what concepts and advertising campaigns are made of. So I was kind of interested in that. And I think it's through that I realized that I'm really intrigued. Instead of these bigger kind of psychological developments, I'm more intrigued by the smaller decision-making processes.
Okay.
You know, I got very interested in kind of the way the brain works, obviously from my education, but understanding how irrational thinking works and how we're such irrational human beings, and that the brain really wasn't built for modern society. And the things that worked for kind of prehistoric times or for the cavemen don't work in this society anymore. You know, we saw through the pandemic, fight and flight, you know, which was great back then. Not so much now. Now we're just in a constant state of fright and flight. So I think those are the things that really intrigue me. And then, so from that, I went into research, and went into the research agency side,
Okay.
and really started to be interested in these human truths, started to be interested in, again, how the brain works in these minute decisions throughout the day of like, what brand of toothpaste to use, like, why am I reaching out for rum instead of tequila when I want to have fun, like things like that. At the same time, I was very interested in, again, this irrational thinking and how the brain, in order to make sense of the data overload that we have and this limited cognitive resources that we have, is the brain creates these heuristics, or almost like mental shortcuts, right?
Okay.
And part
I
of
like
those
that. Mental shortcuts make
mental
sense.
shortcuts, right? Because it's too much right now. Like,
There's so much information out there. Information is coming at us so quickly with such advance, before you even like think about AI or anything else, before a year or two ago that we knew about all of that. Everything has been coming at us very, very quickly. And so that makes sense to me that the brain has to have, okay, how do we take the shortcut from A to B?
right, right. And it's the brain. I mean, if you think about it, yes, it's back in the cave days, but it's pretty smart to do that. Like, it knows that, like, hey, I can't cope, so I have to create my own shortcuts. But some of these shortcuts, which again are pretty smart, create biases, create kind of decisions that aren't based in logic. So for example, one of these could be confirmation bias.
Okay.
Whereas, you're looking for an answer that kind of is just there to complement what you already believe, or, things like that. So I think mirroring those two interests for me kind of naturally put me in the corporate world.
Okay.
Um, and I tried to choose companies that had a more purpose-led kind of initiative, rather than, just a financial initiative. So that was kind of my way of balancing out kind of this intrigue that I have for these low stake decision processes. But at the end of the day, I don't want to just study for 20 years why Coke versus Pepsi, on a shelf. So that's why the companies that I chose, I felt like there was an angle, that really understood that the human purpose and the human truth, and also value trends and research and insights and all that stuff.
So let
So
me ask this. In your journey, you've been at some major brands. How did you end up at Airbnb? Because that's a different type of brand than you had been at previously.
yeah, and so I'm fairly open to industries. And I think that's one of my now superpowers, is that I haven't been tied to an industry. So I went from Unilever to Nickelodeon, from, media to Nickelodeon, to the toy industry, to the travel industry. I do believe that it is my superpower, because I can take the learnings that I have regardless of the industry, and I can break those silos and create these like learning pathways through the different industries. So I got to Airbnb the way most people get to Airbnb, is Airbnb reaches out and says, I've seen you've done really interesting work. Come here amongst these other really interesting people and do more interesting work here. So, and I had to follow. I just had to. I thought it was, I love industries that disrupt also. So, all of these are kind of industries or companies that take risks, and there's no bigger disruptor than Airbnb.
That is very true.
So,
And so admirable and so interesting and fascinating to watch what they've done and how they've built and everything they've done in the marketplace in the last I couldn't even count the years, but I'll say bunch of years, general.
yeah, yes, I totally agree. And, before that I was at Mattel, which, I do have to say was instrumental in who I am and kind of my, success and the things that I was able to do and the things that the company was able to do because of it. So I do want to have a shout out to just working there and the great work that was created there.
So one thing I really admire about you is you're a mom with a few kids. You've moved a bunch. And I have to say, sometimes that can neuter moms saying, oh, the stability of the kids. How have you managed to lead your family and lead your, as well as your business career?
Yeah, we have moved a lot, and we've moved countries, we've moved states, even within the same town, we've moved houses. So you know what, I think it probably has to do with first my upbringing. I grew up and moved around a lot.
Okay.
My mother is Greek Swedish, my father is German American, kind of, so I come from a diverse
So just a few countries in there.
and I grew up in Europe growing up. But right now, like, one of the things that I do is I'm really involved in and an advocate for trends work and foresight works. And one of the things that I see is during this like very unpredictable time, we're in the world of VUCA, which is, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's what's coined to create kind of the term VUCA, which describes this ever-changing landscape that we have right now. And one of the things that comes out for that is just the need for resilience and for younger people right now to really be adaptable, to be resilient. So I think that's been a driver for me. And for my kids is, look, this world is going to change. We're going to change all the time. You can't just like sit back and be, the comforts of stability. Like, that can't be your anchor. That can be a nice surprise. And you need stability in some things. Like, I'm not saying like chaos everywhere.
No, and I think there's a difference between stability and chaos.
Right.
Right? There's stability, and stability can be the family unit wherever it is.
That's
right?
exactly. Yes.
Stability, and I think it really is a gift to all the younger generations to be learning resilience as they mature and go through the various decades of their lives. And so you don't end up at later on with all of a sudden smack in the face in your midlife and you have to be resilient and you don't have any training, it's truly training or insight to it or memory to pull on, even in the little things.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I feel like one of the things that my kids have is they have these tools to be able to cope with, changing circumstances with, and they're adaptive. They're able to not ground themselves in the changes and not use that as kind of a defense mechanism. We've been, and, right or wrong, the way we kind of raised them with all these moves is not to give too much of an emphasis on it. So, obviously we're there to kind of create, and as you said, the stability of the family unit. So we're there, we're very loving, we're a very kind of tight-knit family. But at the same time, we're not going to coddle the fact that we're moving a lot. We're not going to give that clutch to it. The same thing is, my middle son, he had a severe dairy allergy when he was young. And we always our attitude was always like, okay, it is what it is. Like, we're not going to make a big deal about it. We're going to let people know, but we're not going to change everything around to adapt to him. He has to be able to learn how to adapt to his environment, which means that he might have to do added work. He might have to, and we would have to bring the cupcakes. We would have to bring, the dessert. We would have to bring all these things to the pizza and ice cream party and stuff like that. But it did teach him that he's in control of his own destiny And
I like it.
it gave him that sense of power, I think, over circumstances too and change. So, I mean, we'll see, but it's still out there. He's 16 now. He might, like, he might send me the therapist's bill in a couple of years, but
It's so funny because I said the same thing about my son, who's like turning like now around 29. And I said, I remember saying, oh my goodness, I'm not going to say, I'm going to be cautious in what I say, but I remember saying at one point of he was speech challenged, he was growth challenged. There was a variety of things. There was bullying that was going on. These are various stages. And I remember saying, all right, so one day if I get the therapist bill, I'll just pay it and it's going to be fine. It's just going to be fine. I'm not going to stress over it. There's enough to stress over in life. It's going to be fine.
right. Yep, exactly. I'm here for that.
So let's talk about resilience a little bit, because you are an amazing role model. You're an amazing role model in ways of people who have faced challenges, and you have faced some major challenges in your own life, and it's never stopped you. And it's one of the things I truly admire so much about you. And when you bring up the word resilience, and it's like, okay, we're going to go here. Are you open? And I believe you said you were, Monica. Like, share a little bit about your journey of what nobody would actually on this interview know if they didn't know.
Yeah, so yes, I am very open to it. So I am hearing impaired. I rely on hearing aids. I rely on captions. I rely on subtitles. I get a lot of things wrong. So I rely on humor, and all those things. So,
I really appreciate, by the way, I happen to love that you put that in there, is we're all going to get things wrong.
yes.
And having humor as part of the things, because we have choices. We could laugh or we can cry, and we're all going to be thrown a good number of obstacles in our lives. And
Yes.
all how you face it. And if you keep a sense of humor about life, it makes it so much easier. That's my little antidote.
That is so true. And I wish, I wish I knew that at a younger age. I think that's something that came with maturity and age. So as with a lot of hearing loss, the hows, the whys, we don't know. My father was a pilot, and I went on many different flights with him. And so one of the theories is, with the air pressure and in the cabins. And so that could be one. It could be degenerate, like who knows what it is. The point is I've always had it, but because it was during a time and during an era where younger people weren't associated with hearing loss unless it was complete hearing loss. Which, when I was a child, it was either you were deaf or you could hear. That in between.
There was no middle ground there. There was no middle ground. It was straightforward. It was yes or yeah. It was right or left and no middle.
Right. So because of that, I was misdiagnosed and misunderstood many times. Again, the association a lot of times is either I was a daydreamer, I wasn't paying attention, or it kind of correlated to my mental ability. Like she just doesn't get it. She's not that smart, So I kind of grew up with that and I internalized all of that. The truth is. And so I never linked it to hearing loss. And I also thought that that's how everyone hears. I didn't have any other.
So how can you compare?
Same. I'm an only child, so this is what it is. And only when I went to, and I had inkling here and there that when I was in high school and middle school that I don't think I'm the same as other people, but I couldn't put my finger on it, what it was. When I went to college, so I was in Europe during my school years. When I went to college, I went to the US, and it was the first time that I listened to TV without subtitles. And I remember it was 90210, which we would all gather.
I remember that.
And I was kind of looking around. I was like, well, we need subtitles here. And they were like, why? I'm like, because we can't follow this. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I thought, well, we can't hear what's happening. And, there were like 10, 15 girls in the room and they were all like, no, we can all hear what's happening. And I think that was like, it came crashing down. And still I knew, and again, there were many other kind of indications. When I started working, ironically, my job depended on listening. So as a
So
therapist,
you knew I was going to bring it back around here. It's like, this is fascinating. So you went into psychotherapy where you actually listen to people for a living.
mm-hmm.
Yep. We can only hear so much.
Yeah. And
it's a great way to get through the psychotherapy though.
Yeah. Not only that, I did group therapy.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the irony is amazing from that. So I started out in group therapy and then I went into research and I did qualitative research. I was a moderator again for group discussions and I couldn't do my job. I couldn't follow. I couldn't hear what people were saying. I couldn't make out the words. So then that's when I really had to take, the denial kind of had to be lifted and I had to confront what I was doing. So I finally went to the doctor and, and I remember there was a couple things when I went to the doctor. One is they do these tests where they increase the background noise and so they have you listening to like sentences and then they increase the background noise. And in that moment, I started bawling my eyes out because it became difficult, but I was like, I was like persevering through the difficulty and like, stumbling it through and then, reached the point where I couldn't anymore. And I was just crying and crying. And I turned around and there was tissue papers everywhere. And the doctor, the audiologist was like, yeah, everyone has the same reaction. I still get goosebumps because it's the natural kind of inclination for people of my demographics and in my history to want to fight it so much until you can't, and then you just break down. And it was that breaking down moment that when I saw that there were like 5 different tissue papers in that little booth, I realized like, oh, I'm not alone here. This is something that is shared. And then when they, the audiologist gave me the results and she was like, I can't believe you've made it so far. You were, clinically deaf and you are trying to make it in a hearing world. So that I really did kind of just melt at that point in the doctor's office. And I allowed myself after that to melt. I think I was trying so hard to conform and to be quote unquote normal.
Right.
That it became all about strength and not letting, my authentic self or my, unperfect self come through. And then at that moment, it just came crashing and burning down.
So I have to ask you this. You're in numerous rooms with meetings, boardrooms, auditoriums. That is naturally challenging. Hearing aids are not hearing aids.
Yes.
How have you and I want to give a huge shout out to you because none of this has ever stopped you from scaling your career as a woman leader or stopping you from achieving anything you've wanted. What are some of the tips that you have seen that has been helpful that other women and other listeners can embrace and learn from?
Yeah, so I made a choice at one point to make my disability a benefit and to turn it around and to kind of own my own narrative on this. And because I can, therefore I will advocate for others. And this is done through a lot of reflective work. Right. I've been working for 25 years. This didn't happen overnight and still it's a work in progress, but the number one,
we all a work in progress.
Right, 100%. So I had to really embrace my, what I call like my authentic self as a whole and leverage my strengths. And by that is really understanding like, okay, this isn't my strength. but what are my strengths that then can work and almost negate maybe some other things or help bring out some other things. So one of those things for me has been, relying on the support of other people. Yeah. And as, we brought out that, I am a female, I am a mom. And I think especially for moms and women, it's hard to rely on people. We're taught to we're caregivers. We're all about sacrifice, right? Like
we are nurturers by nature. You're right. We are all about sacrifice. We want to take care of everybody else in the room. We very often forget to put ourselves, forget to put ourselves first, forget to sit in the room.
Right, right. And it's considered selfish if you do. It's considered, if you don't cater to your kids' needs, your partner's needs, your team's needs, your this, it's considered like selfish, that, like all those things. But I realized early on that I needed to, and that's what I call I leverage that strength, that understanding that I need to rely on other people. And therefore I do. So in those forums, so for example, I do public speaking, and in public speaking, Q&As are very difficult for me. I can't hear the question. So I will always, have someone usually in the first row or very close to me that then can hear the question and recite it back to me. And usually I will tell the room why this is happening. But so I do that. When I go into meeting rooms now, there's 2 or 3 people that know that are there to ensure that I get for example, the seat in the middle of the room that's closest to the microphones, that, I need, because of my hearing, I need to be in the center. So, can help me advocate for my needs without it being a me kind of thing. So I think that is, the support of other people and letting people, you advocate for yourself, but letting them also kind of help you in this thing has helped me a lot.
So as we come to a close, I always like to ask let me ask you a piece of advice, a tip for our listeners, people who are building their careers, building their own businesses. What can you say to the women leaders who are here today, as well as the ones who are coming up, that has been a benefit to you?
I think 2 things. One is listen to your inner voice. I think there's a lot of noise out there. Again, a lot of progress has made for female leaders, but at the same time, there's a lot of noise and these preconceived molds. This idea of conforming to expectations, whatever those are, of being, a type A, of being the loud one, of being kind of dynamic, powerful, of, there's all these norms that are out there on what a leader should be, how a female leader should be, what she should do, what she shouldn't do. And I think just listening to your inner voice, I'll give an example. By nature, I'm soft-spoken. I don't like confrontation. I find myself more of a gentle soul than not. And earlier in my career, I fought really hard to overcome that, to become more strong, to become more, dominant and type A and stuff. And I realized that success isn't success unless it comes from your authentic self, and unless you're able to bring your true self to the table, because then it's someone else's idea of success. It doesn't feel your own. So listening to my own voice and who I am helped me at the end kind of really take on success. This is who I am. I'm able to bring my true self to the table, and therefore that makes me successful or not, with my hearing loss, with, my soft spoken, with me moving around and all the time, all the things that are me, then that can contribute to my success story. So that is one thing that I would say. The other tip that I give women now, because I do try to mentor younger women coming in all the time, is creating a support group of other women. I think that has been instrumental to me. I have a support group. We're 6 women that met during difficult times, but from then created a work kind of camaraderie that we're always there for each other. The group is called Boast Bitches, if I can say that.
Okay.
And the reason
Love
is,
it.
yeah, it's because we're not only there to like give advice and, the more kind of, but we're there to celebrate each other. We're there to boast for each other. We're there to like, I want to hear all your victories and glories. I want to know how you smashed the patriarchy during that meeting. I want to know how I want to know all these things because we boost each other up that way. So, but that works for me. But whatever the support group of that you need, whatever cadence and stuff, surrounding yourself with a group of women that are there to cheerlead you, I think is the best thing that has happened to me.
I think the 2 things you shared are spot on. Surround yourself with people who are there for you and you're there for them, that you could talk anything and everything through, holding nothing back. And don't let yourself hold yourself back. Be you. It's funny when you talked about being soft-spoken, because that is me. I don't love confrontation. And then people's like, well, how as a woman did you navigate 20 some odd years by printing presses in a boys club? I said, in the first couple of, at the beginning, it was hard. And then I earned the respect. And I just, you follow through and you take the next step and you take the next step. So Monica, how can our listeners learn more about you and potentially reach out?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, Monica Dreger. I try to answer everyone and, make those connections and, create new ones. I love it. So LinkedIn is a great place.
I love it. I cannot thank you enough for being here and joining me here today on Her Success Story. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Ivy. It was great talking to you. Loved it.
And listeners, this is what I say at this point in the show. Take a deep breath. Take that moment in. I so appreciate you listening to Her Success Story and listening to Monica and I's conversation today. But find that one thing that was meaningful for you. Identify it, maybe write it down, and decide what action you're going to take from there that's going to benefit you, your growth, your career, and your business. If this episode was helpful, please pass it forward to friends and colleagues, and don't forget to hit subscribe. We come into your inbox with wonderful interviews like Monica and I's conversation today every week. See you next time.